Rival forces refused to negotiate after 6 days of fighting in Sudan, despite UN calls for an immediate ceasefire. 2 women were injured after a Russian jet accidentally dropped munitions on Belgorod, a city just over the border from Ukraine. As French protesters vent their anger at his pension reforms, President Macron insists on sticking to his agenda. Gunfire and explosions across Khartoum, but also reports of fighting across Sudan as the 2 sides in the conflict refuse to negotiate. Sudan's military ruler Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, also known as Hemedti, who leads the paramilitary rapid support forces, said they're unwilling to negotiate with each other. Nearly 330 civilians have been killed and thousands more injured since the fighting erupted on Saturday. 20,000 have fled their homes. US diplomats remain in the city.
Our team in Khartoum, we remain in close contact with them. To our understanding, they are safe.
The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has called for an immediate truce of 3 days for the end of Ramadan. It's hoped this could be the first step towards a permanent ceasefire. Late on Thursday, authorities in Belgorod, a Russian city just over the border from Ukraine, reported a large blast that left a 20-metre crater in a central street. Vyacheslav Gladkov, the regional governor, posted pictures on his official Telegram account showing damage caused after the explosion. Russia's defense ministry said one of its warplanes accidentally dropped or fired ordnance over the city. The governor said 2 women were injured and 1 was taken to a local hospital. A warm meeting in Havana of Cold War allies. Cuba is the last stop on Sergei Lavrov's tour of the Americas, a tour that won't be taking in the USA. The Russian foreign minister gave his hosts a frank appraisal of his country's attitude to Washington.
Если вы спрашиваете про российско-американские отношения, у нас сейчас каких-то особых отношений нет. Мы только по необходимости обсуждаем те проблемы, которые возникают в деятельности наших посольств, ну и также в связи с тем, что американцы пытаются злоупотреблять своим положением, в частности, в качестве страны-хозяйки Организации Объединенных Наций.
Laying a wreath to Jose Marti, a hero of the country's independence struggle, Lavrov condemned American sanctions on Cuba. The anger against the French government continues ahead of the big Workers' Day demonstration. This Thursday, a group of demonstrators stormed the exchange operator Euronews in Paris. In Lyon, SNCF officers were invaded by more than 100 railway workers. At the Gardanne power station protest, CGT union leader Sophie Binet called for an historic day of mobilisation on May the 1st.
Le 1er mai, ce sera une journée de mobilisation inédite, exceptionnelle. Inédite parce que c'est la première fois que l'ensemble des organisations syndicales appellent à manifester un 1er mai. Donc ça sera une journée de mobilisation unitaire et populaire.
Meanwhile, on a school visit in Ganges, President Macron was again challenged by local residents.
C'est normal que la colère s'exprime, il faut continuer à avancer. Là, on va aussi continuer à avancer sur les projets d'école et tenir les engagements.
Macron has taken to the streets on a tour across rural France to try to calm citizens' anger over his approval of pension reform after 3 months of demonstrations.
The launch that wasn't to be. SpaceX's Starship rocket, officially the world's largest, has exploded. After a successful liftoff watched by cheering spectators, the 120-metre stainless steel shuttle burst into flames mid-air for reasons yet to be determined by the company's engineers. However, SpaceX says it still considers Thursday's mission a success and says Starship experienced a, quote, unscheduled rapid assembly prior to stage separation. The boss of SpaceX billionaire Elon Musk congratulated his teams shortly after takeoff and promised a new test in a few months. This was the second attempt to send Starship into orbit after Monday's scheduled launch was cancelled.
More solidarity among EU member states in managing migratory pressure. That's the goal of the European Parliament after approving on Thursday 3 key proposals on migration that aim to end the years-long standoff between EU member states on how to deal with the issue. The principle of the so-called Dublin regulation, which means that every asylum seeker coming to Europe should present their request in the country of first entry, remains valid, but with more exceptions like the family or educational ties of migrants. According to MEPs, though, solidarity between EU countries should be expressed in different ways.
Well, it's binding to make sure that every member state contribute, but then what we offer from the European Parliament is that we should have flexible options, that we will see some member states that will work with relocation, others might work with capacity building. And this is because we want to open up the deadlock that we have seen for years, because something needs to happen now.
The vote by MEPs establishes the European Parliament's stance in negotiations on the issue with the EU Council. If the Parliament gets its way, physical relocations would still apply under normal circumstances, but would become binding when a member state calls it a crisis situation. The Commission would then have to assess the crisis request and, if confirmed, set quotas of migrants to be deployed to the other countries.
Solidarity may have a chance. Solidarity when it comes to emergency crisis situations. That's precisely the point of this regulation.
Mandatory relocation is a key point for Mediterranean countries like Italy, which has this year seen a 300% increase of migrants by sea. The system of voluntary relocations which is currently in place has not worked well. And despite several thousand pledges, only a few hundred people have so far been transferred from Italy to other member states. Negotiations between the Parliament and Council are unlikely to be easy, given the years of tension.
La crainte principale dans la négociation avec les conseils, c'est qu'au lieu de mettre en avant les mécanismes de solidarité entre les États membres dans l'accueil et dans l'intégration, on privilégie l'approche sécuritaire qui va mener à une augmentation de la détention et l'accélération des procédures de retour.
EU governments will push hard for the aspects related to the external dimension of migration, like the screening of migrants at borders and leverage that can be used against countries of origin for their return.
Local elections will be held in the north of Kosovo on Sunday. However, turnout in the 4 municipalities is expected to be low because the main Kosovo Serb party has said it will boycott the polls. A small Euronews Serbia street survey backs up the prediction.
Gospođo, izlazite na izbore u nedjelju?
Ne.
Zašto?
Ma neću, ne dolazi u obzir.
Ma jo, pa kaki?
Zašto?
Pa ne znam. Tako izvinim.
Pa ne izlazi niko što bi ja izašla. Eto. Da li mislite da će Srbi da izađu u nedjelju? Neće sigurno. Ali možda i neće biti izbora na kraju. Zbog regularnosti, legitimnosti. Mislim, možda će se sačekati bolja vremena. Sigurnije.
Kosovo's Prime Minister said the elections were essential if democratic institutions were to function normally. However, he expected a low turnout.
Mirë po nuk mund të tolerojmë që edhe më tej të shtyhen zgjedhjet, sepse kjo u bë me 10 dhjetor të vitit kaluar dhe nuk mund të tolerojmë që të ketë edhe vakum institucional.
That vacuum was created when Serbs abandoned the institutions governing the 4 municipalities. Kosovo election law does not stipulate a minimum turnout, but the Serb list questions the legitimacy of institutions elected by a handful of voters.
A Texas-born princess has been evicted from a historic villa in Rome that contains the only known ceiling painted by Caravaggio. Thursday's events capped a years-long inheritance dispute between the princess and her stepchildren over the 16th century villa.
I feel like I'm in a surreal movie, like Sartre's No Exit, basically. And, hey. So, it's unreal. I've lived here for 20 years. I have accomplished so much in the 20 years. We digitized 150,000 documents thanks to American University.
Princess Ludovisi was evicted after a judge ruled she'd violated a prohibition on conducting guided tours of the villa, something she claimed was necessary to pay for its upkeep.
Because she's American, she cannot do whatever she wants. This is a country. We have our police, we have our judges, and you need to respect our country and our laws if you stay here. Otherwise, you can go back to Canada or to where the hell or Texas or some place where she's coming from.
The villa was put up for auction last year, but has so far failed to sell, despite its famous painting. The only known mural by Caravaggio, it was commissioned in 1597 and depicts Neptune, Pluto and Jupiter.
Criminal charges have been dropped against Hollywood actor ALEC Baldwin over a fatal on-set shooting 2 years ago. Cinematographer Helena Hutchins was killed by a live bullet fired from a prop gun that was being used by Baldwin. The Emmy Award-winning actor was charged with 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter over the incident during the filming of Rust in New Mexico. Now special prosecutors say new facts have been revealed requiring further investigation. The development comes less than 2 weeks before a trial was set to begin.